Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Chris Burns, and this is a very important COP26 side event on how the EU is getting the world to switch to green, especially the developing world. And I've seen that on the ground as a reporter, and I've reported on a lot of development projects around the world. And so it's very inspiring for me to hear from these different projects and also to hear from the European Commission and the Asian Development Bank on their efforts. I would just like to point out that switch to green is part of the global Green Deal that the EU is doing. The EU can't do this alone, and switch to green is offering tools, technical assistance, and other support to make this switch to green happen. So we want to talk about concrete examples of how to make this shift an opportunity, to bring more resource efficiency, more recycling, to close the resource loops. And our guests are, for the next hour, are you. First of all, we'd like to get your questions coming in via the chat. And we have with us Chantal Marinson of the European Commission's DG International Partnerships. It's INPA, used to be called DevCo. Head of Unit F2, Jana Zilkova, head of Mission Caritas Czech Republic in Mongolia, working on the Switch Asia project, recycling building materials, very, very interesting, and which should be done everywhere, right? And Raymond Okrofu Atagebi, the environment and renewable energy expert at Safisana, that's part of the Switch Africa Green Project, Green Biogas Ghana. And perhaps we will be joined by Mohammed Irfan Tarek, Ministry of Climate Change, Pakistan, Director General of Environment and Climate Change. But he's a very busy guy right now because there's a lot of negotiations going on in Glasgow. So if he is not joining us, we have Cosima Stach, who's key expert, South Asia, Switch Asia SCP facility, and Catherine Thode. You are in Glasgow. You made it on a train. It's great to see you. Principal Environment Specialist, Asian Development Bank, Asia and Pacific. The ADB is Asia and Pacific's Climate Bank. So great people to talk to. Let's start with Chantal. And by the way, if anyone hears a good soundbite, please cast it wider. Hashtag switch to number 2 green, switch to green, and hashtag EU at COP26. And of course, hashtag COP26. Chantal, hello, good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
Tell us, how does this circular economy fit into the EU's global drive for a carbon neutral economy? We know as Europeans, I'm a European citizen, that we can't do this alone. We need to show leadership, but we need to work with the rest of the world. How are we doing this?
So yes, you're absolutely right, Chris. We need to all work together. No single country or even region can do it alone. So it's a global ambition. It's a global venture. We think on the European side that circular economy is really important for climate mitigation, but also adaptation. Not only for the climate, also for the biodiversity, where will be another COP in Kunming later on. But so it really hits both of the targets. On the climate side, of course, the majority of the greenhouse gas emissions are associated with material handling and use to provide mobility, housing, nutrition for the world's population. The supply of energy and its consumption in buildings and transport, you were mentioning trains and aeroplanes earlier, really does account for 55% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And the remaining 45% are derived from extraction and processing of materials and resources that are needed to make the products that we use. So the European Union really wants to increase circularity in the way that goods and materials are produced and used in our economies. And this, we think, would offer a really significant opportunity to also reduce these GHG emissions. So at the same time, we really see the opportunity of using circularity to contribute to the resilience of our economies. It's an opportunity to adapt to the shocks like climate change, first by introducing new business models to increase market resilience, and secondly, also by using the resources more efficiently by recovering materials that are embedded in products, by supporting and reversing logistics to strengthen and to become more self-sufficient in resources. And you probably know that circular economy is really at the heart of the EU's growth policy. It's embedded in the European Green Deal, and it's a cornerstone of our climate action. So through related thematic strategies, like the European Circular Economy Action Plan, the European Union already encourages circular economy transition in its external action with a range of cooperation areas in the environment, in private sector and sustainable cities.
Yeah, Chantal, that's interesting. And it's very important to point out the thing that this is an opportunity. It's part of job creation. We're going to shift to other jobs, obviously, but this is an opportunity, really. It should be seen not as a burden, but as an opportunity. And what kind of feedback are you getting over there in Glasgow from other countries that you'd like to work with on this switch to green? What kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not in Glasgow, but we get feedback.
Oh, I thought you were. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's yes.
I'm afraid that I'm not. We did our bit long distance for Glasgow, but I mean we're in touch with countries all the time, and what we really welcome is all of the regional initiatives that are coming, you know, that are sort of sprouting up, like the African Circular Economy Alliance, but also Latin America and Caribbean economic coalitions. We think that they're really important, and obviously we're leading with UNEP and UNIDO, the global circular economy resource efficiency. So we think that that's, you know, very, very welcome. What's also very important of obviously are concrete projects. Some of them are going to be presented today.
Indeed.
And we've been supporting that, you know, for a number, well, you know, we've been supporting that for a number of years. So we're seeing that there are real value in supporting economic practices in other regions, and that's what the switch, the different switch programs have been doing in Asia, Latin America, but also in Africa. And we've got some interesting results from projects in Africa, for instance, where we see that mechanisms to improve the resource efficiency and promote secondary market material markets is showing really significant results in terms of greenhouse gas emission reduction. So we've got these kinds of examples out there, and obviously we want to show what Europe can do, share our practices, but we also want to learn from others. Our economies are different. Mm-hmm. And I think we've got different, you know, we've got different experiences, and if we share them, we only make ourselves stronger.
Right. In fact, yeah, that's I think that's an issue at COP26 is other countries are saying, well, great, the developing world would like to be a part of this, but we need help. And this is some of the assistance with Switch to Green. That's an example of that. And yes, economies are different. We'll hear that from Mr. Tariq in a few moments. He is with us. Mr. Tariq is welcome to join us. Let me go first, though, to the concrete examples that you mentioned, Chantal. Let's go to Jana Zilkova, of head of mission Caritas Czech Republic in Mongolia. We talked about this earlier a couple of days ago, Jana, this recycling of building materials. Tell us how that's working for you.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon from Mongolia. So just for you to imagine, the construction is booming in Mongolia. We have been working in the construction sector since 2012, and we can honestly say that it has never been more booming than these years. According to the emissions gap report 2020 from the UN Environment Programme, the construction sector accounts for 38% of all energy CO2 emissions when adding building construction industry emissions. The report also stated that green pandemic recovery could cut up to 25% of predicted 2030 greenhouse gas emissions. It is fair and honest to say that the implementation of circular approaches is not a straightforward process in Mongolia, and I also believe elsewhere. Mongolia is on the right track to become more circular than ever before. Thanks to the amazing support from the European Union and Switch Asia program, we work primarily in the construction and recycling sector, where we have seen an incredible progress in the last 10 years. In other words, I would say that there were no circular nor sustainable practices in place 10 years ago. However, I also cannot state that we have reached the best possible results and we can simply ease our efforts. On the contrary, both construction and recycling sectors in Mongolia need our utmost attention, and that's why we keep working in those sectors. In our case, we managed to put together experts from respective ministries, the parliament, small and medium enterprises, universities, and NGOs, pretty much all different sectors, who came up with the new regulations on sustainable practices in construction and demolition management. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that what was impossible in 2019 is now possible and even more preferred. The pandemic made the price of construction materials more expensive, and thus our solutions to produce construction and demolition waste-based products to build new roads, bridges, or even new buildings is now cheaper than imported construction materials.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. This part that the silver lining in the COVID crisis was making building materials more expensive, and thus the recycled ones more attractive. That's amazing. I want to come back to you, but you know what? Mr. Tariq is very, very busy in the COP negotiations for the Pakistani government. And so we need to go to him very quickly before we lose him. Mohammed, are you with us? Can you tell us, we talked a little bit earlier about this, how, economies are different. How can this climate change policy accelerate the transition to a circular economy? How are you seeing that on the ground in Pakistan? Are you with us, Mr. Tariq? Can you hear us? Okay. Mr. Tariq, your mute is perhaps on. Could that be the reason? Hello, Mr. Tariq. Okay, well, until he can join us, maybe one more question to Yana, but Mr. Tariq, please jump in when you are connected. What about the fact that how much more demand are you seeing as a result of COVID? How are you seeing that on the ground? Are you overbooked?
I wish. No, of course, there is much more demand than a year ago. Also, the borders between China and Mongolia are now closed, so most of the construction materials is not coming. I think Mr. Tariq is here.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Tariq, can you hear me? Mohammed? Can you hear me? Mr. Tariq, can you hear me? Okay. Well, it seems like a pretty dicey connection, but maybe we can try this. All right. Do I hear you, Mr. Tariq? Okay, perhaps in the meantime, let's get that angle from Cosima Shah, who's key expert at South Asia Switch Asia SCP facility.
Yes,
Cosima?
I have actually worked extensively with Mr. Parikh on the issue of green buildings in Pakistan. And so maybe just as a general perspective from the SCP facility, where we support national governments in Asia on greening their policies and also bringing about the circular economy, it is really that climate change policy and the circular economy are intrinsically linked. And policy in general, climate policy, needs to target the 5 most emissions-intensive sectors: energy, agriculture, buildings, mobility, and industry. And of course, it becomes, just from stating these, very much apparent that this transformation will change the economy, not only energy production, but really change how goods are produced and also how they are used. And all of these sectors require circular approaches that minimize emissions, but also have other effects. So regenerative, not fossil-based, nature positive, not purely extractive, and circular, not linear approaches to consumption and production. And to be effective and in line with timelines laid out by science and the Paris Agreement, climate change policy needs to provide the framework for this groundbreaking change from the take, waste, use model to an economy of circularity. And it's really the only option also to fulfill the Paris Agreement ambitions, meaning that we do have a sort of implicit commitment of all signatories of the Paris Agreement to a circular economy.
Of course, Cosima. This is well established. Can you give us a concrete example of how this is working on the ground, perhaps in Pakistan?
Yeah, so I think the EU is, of course, at the moment at the forefront in terms of policy, but all societies have their own experiences with more circular models of living, consumption and production in their past. And I think Pakistan is also a very good example of, for example, in the building sector, re-establishing building techniques that have long been practiced and that are now even more important to take up again in terms of materials, in terms of design, etc.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're talking about materials too, because Jana, I see you nodding, because can you give us a couple, because I kind of cut you off a little bit earlier there. Can you give us a concrete example of what kinds of materials and how are you recycling them?
So we can talk about, honestly, 90% of the materials that is worked on the construction side, but mostly we talk about, of course, concrete. Then we can also recycle plastics for different purposes.
That's probably the biggest issue, I think, around the world, is what do we do with all the PVC, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Our research particularly focused on concrete, and we pretty much mixed the concrete from the natural resources with 40 to 30% of the recycled concrete from the construction side, and we actually found out that the quality of these recycled materials and recycled product is as good as the materials that comes entirely 100% from the natural resources. Sure. So because many people are really worried about the quality. What if, for example, the concrete won't be as strong and as quality as the one coming from the natural resources? But we found out, our research actually found out, and later also our economic feasibility studies and also some practical examples that we did, we found out that it's totally okay.
Okay, I want to come back to you, but I want to go then now to Raymond. Raymond, on your project in Ghana on waste to energy. Tell us about that. How does this circular business model, how does it work? How circular is it?
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be part of this discussion. Yes, so in Ghana, we built a waste recycling plant, which has become a model. Now, this desire was fueled by a strong belief we have that the millions of people living in non-seaward urban areas can be their conditions can be fundamentally improved. According to WHO, more than about 850 deaths, I mean, in low to middle income countries still happen because of diseases arising or connected to non-treated wastewater. So this is actually what fueled our desire to build the plants that we have in Ghana.
Yeah, and it's quite impressive that you took this on. You took the bull by the horns and you went straight to the problem. You went to the biggest slum in Accra, right?
Yep.
And,
correct.
And what did you do?
Okay, so what we did was to connect the various dots that were hitherto not connected and make a sense out of it. So we built a plant that is recycling organic waste and fecal sludge. Now, in this plant, we collect organic waste from the slaughterhouses, from the food market, from homes, and from industry, and also from fecal, let's say public toilets. All right.
Yeah. Sewage.
Yeah.
Sewage. Yeah.
Okay. So in this.
This is early in the morning. You don't need to get too graphic, but go ahead.
Exactly. So in this plant, we process this waste, produce biogas, which is used for producing green energy, and is fed into the plant. And by the way, this is the first grid-connected biogas plant in Africa. In West Africa. Okay, and
Very
then we also come out with organic fertilizer, and then treated wastewater for irrigation. So the circularity is actually expressed in this. So renewable energy, agriculture, and then some amount of irrigation water for agricultural purposes around. So this is what we have been doing, and then we believe that treating wastewater is directly connected to climate change. Treating organic waste directly connected to climate change, because I mean the carbon and all that is expressing all that we do.
Right. And so you're checking a lot of boxes at the same time. But what's your business model? How is this working business-wise?
Okay, so we have about 4 streams of income. Okay, let me first of all start with the cost. The cost is divided into 2. We have the capex and then the operational cost. The capex initially we started with grant money from Africa Development Bank and the Dutch government, and we put up the facility. Now the operational cost actually comes from 4 sources of income. First, we sell the electricity to the national grid, so the government pays us for the amount of energy we put on the grid.
Okay.
And then we also serve the local agricultural market with our high premium organic fertilizer. Okay. And then we also charge a little money for dumping waste. So people dump at our site, especially the industries. We handle their organic waste, and then they pay some amount for it. And of course, the final one is we monetize the irrigation water, which is also very high in nutrient.
Okay, so the sum of the parts, the bottom line, how does it go? Are you breaking even yet, or when will you?
Well, okay, so this is one of the the surprises we had. We are in the 7th year of our production. We projected to break even in the 5th year, but in the 7th year we are close to 90%. So we are hoping that by close of or the middle of next year we should be breaking even.
Very interesting. I want to come back to that. That's fascinating how that is working. Let's move on to Catherine Thode over in Glasgow. Hello, Catherine. And you know, Raymond mentioned about how they're using, you know, part of the financing is through the African Development Bank. I'm sure the Asian Development Bank is doing similarly. Can you tell us a concrete example of that?
A concrete example of a project that we're financing. Sure. So we have a range of different projects. I was going to say that, yeah, one of the things that has happened here in Glasgow is that we had signed an MDB nature statement with the African Development Bank, obviously, all of the MDBs, which is about mainstreaming nature within our financial operations. And one of the things that I think is quite important that it acknowledges is the drivers of nature degradation. And I think that's something, I think a lot of finance has been very directed at the energy side, but we haven't been looking so much at at the supply chain angle, which is so important here. With the circular economy. There are quite a lot of examples that I could mention. One that I will talk about, which is a pilot study at this stage, is looking at plastic recycling, but linking it with sustainable tourism. So this is in Cirebon in Indonesia. And the idea is to promote green procurement strategies and green products and services in the hospitality sector.
Okay.
And using the UNEP Global Plastic Tourism Toolkit, an initiative to promote the use of upstream measures and solutions. And then we've been developing a test facility which will provide an opportunity to develop and test plastic reduction, substitution, and reverse logistic solutions.
With the idea that if you're risk sharing with the private sector, once they get on their feet, like Raymond's trying to do, then they don't need you anymore. It's seed money to get started. It's not a subsidy; it's seed money, right?
Yes, exactly, and also bringing in the buyers, or that aspect right from the very beginning, so that you've got I think with Raymond's example that it's very important that you know you're going to have a market for the products that you're substituting or changing. I guess
key to point out too is development banks don't just shovel out money, they also give expertise and other things. What are these other things that ADB and others provide?
Sure. So we provide technical assistance. I think we want to work more closely with the EU Switch program around that, but we work with the Philippines in developing a sustainable consumption and production action plan. We've been looking at support for extended producer responsibility. Then some of the other things that we can do with that is work with companies or governments to also look at support through certification and standards. So an example of that, because we've got Mongolia here, is we supported one of the largest cashmere companies to develop a sustainability strategy for themselves, but also to support the development of a Mongolian national standard for cashmere production. So that focused initially on herder practices, and now further work is being carried out on the raw cashmere processing. I guess then in terms of the actual finance, there's a range of different things. So one area which we have only just been getting into a bit more now is the encouraging of the innovation. So we started a new fund last year called ADB Ventures, which particularly supports entrepreneurs across the region. But then in terms of de-risking investments that deliver impact, we have ways to do that. So recently we've issued green bonds, $9.6 billion of green bonds since 2010, but recently just issued our first blue bonds. And so an example of eligible projects that might be financed by that is a greater waste energy project in the Maldives, and also some work on sustainable food systems and supporting climate smart agriculture, where that would impact pesticide and fertilizer use into the water stream in China. And then
is that waste energy project you're talking about in the Maldives, is that anything similar to what Raymond's doing in Ghana, or is that?
It doesn't have I was interested, so I'm not directly involved with that project, okay, but I don't think it has the same range of products coming out of it. So that is something certainly that I will make sure that those who are involved in it are aware of the Ghana project.
Very good. This is a networking exercise too. It's fantastic. And I'd like to also pull in everyone. You're all connected in the network. You're in the matrix, and anybody who would like to pose a question at this point, I've made a round to the speakers, to our guests, but I'd like anyone else to jump in and send in a question as we continue discussing. Can I move on back to Jana? What lessons have you learned? And maybe you might have something more to comment on how development banks and your organization are helping in Mongolia, for instance, as kind of a case study, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned, we've been working in the construction sector since 2012, and I think that the biggest lesson learned is to motivate people, to share the vision, to share the objective with them, and to try to take them on board, because then work is just much easier and everything gets approved much faster and
so how
easier.
do you win those skeptical hearts and minds?
It's not easy, that's for sure, but of course it's a continuous communication, continuous coordination, showing best practices from other countries, sharing
like
humans.
Yes,
exactly. Sharing human stories of the citizens of Mongolia, but also elsewhere, because at the end it's people whom we are working with, not the machines or not the equipment. So they are at the core of our work.
This is, I mean, it's very interesting you mentioned that, because maybe this is telepathic, but one of our a question from our audience is right now, and thanks for that question. Bring them on. It's in the chat. Just put any question in the chat. Okay, to you and to Raymond, from your experience, how important is the issue of inclusion from your experience? How do you facilitate a just transition to a circular economy? That's I think that's corollary to what you're mentioning there is inclusion. It's also, hey man, what's in it for me kind of thing, right?
I think it's extremely important, if not even the most important part of our work. We should never forget that by transitioning to circular economy, there are particular groups of people who will lose their jobs, and we should never leave them behind. And maybe lessons learned from our side, from Mongolia, is that we actually have to work with them from the very beginning until the very end. They have to be present when we are making some decisions, even though it might not be sometimes comfortable for them, or it might not be comfortable for some other people, but they have to be there.
Is your project, does that involve reskilling, upskilling people to make this program work and give them an alternative, perhaps, to the other jobs that are more carbon heavy, right? So to speak.
Yes, we have been also doing on some training, some really skills-based opportunities to really show that there are also different jobs that people can learn. But also, thankfully, we have amazing partners in Mongolia, different NGOs, both international, local, ADB, EBRD, other banks as well, that have comprehensive training processes, and they are very skilled in this, and we can always recommend to our target groups and final beneficiaries to get in touch with them.
Well, thanks. Raymond, I want to go over to you. This idea of inclusion, that's a policy speak word for getting people involved and showing them that they have a stake in this. How do you do that?
Yes. First of all, Jana asked that in transitioning, definitely some people's work will be affected and we need to carry them along. I want to say that as we do that, more jobs or new jobs are also created along the line. And we need to pay attention to them, because some of these are hitherto not properly recognized. Now, let me use the Safisana case to elaborate. When we started, we modeled our concept initially. We didn't pay a lot of attention to the value chain. We were just building a treatment plant, and then we thought that the waste would come to us naturally to treat. Over time, it doesn't work that way. Over time, we realized that we need to actually get a full grip on the entire chain. If there's a little break in any part of the chain, the whole system doesn't work. So we exactly. So we had to go back, look at where the waste is generated, how it is collected, how it is hauled, and all that, all the way to the end. And this, there are a lot of people connected. And what we did to have a control over the chain is to create business cases along the entire chain. In collection, there are people who are doing this waste collection, segregation, and there has to be a business case for them in there. Those who are in the haulage industry, there has to be a business case for them in there. And in that way, everybody comes along. And we also connected very well with the community members, because the kind of work we do, excuse me to say, we are a little smelly, all right? Our treatment sites, so
part of the business.
Community has to accept that this is very important for our collective gain. And that is very, very crucial. So we don't joke with community acceptance. We don't joke with governmental acceptance. And this is what has largely been responsible for our success.
That's very good. That's very good. I have another question. Question to Chantal this time. How does the EU lead the global switch to the circular economy with partner countries? How do you engage, involve, attract, inspire partner countries? That's probably a very relevant question to what's going on at COP26 right now as we speak, right?
Yeah, and it might not please everybody, but we do have a lot of dialogue, and it has to be really evidence-based. So the idea is that the potential of circular economy contributing to climate needs to be shown to be a catalyst. And there, what we want to do is talk to our partners, try and inspire them, but also, as I was saying earlier, we need to learn from partners.
Yeah,
two-way
street.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be. We provide our experience, we listen, and together we spread the word. I think that what's also important for us is to work with partners on what we call business environment, on their regulations, and that has to really cut across different rules and regulations that you find in countries, or at a regional level as well, be it industry, environmental, finance, but also employment. I mean, I think we've been talking about employment, people being left aside, making sure that they get the right deal, the protection, the upskilling that's necessary to get sort of improved standards, but also more integrated standards, more similar, so that you get a value. I mean, the value chains we're talking about, they're not just in one country. They very often cut across countries and regions before they end in their final sort of destination, if we want as well.
Yeah,
so all of that is very important.
Global. It has to be global. Let me go to Cosima because I guess we don't have Mohammed with us, Mohammed Tariq from the Ministry of Climate Change in Pakistan. But as Chantal was mentioning about working with, and about that question that we got from the audience about working with other governments, what can you say about Pakistan or any other countries in the region you deal with? You're expert on South Asia, Switch Asia, SCP facility. How do you see that? How is the two-way street working in Asia?
Yeah, I really like that Chantal mentioned before that it's really a two-way street. It's really a sort of partnership that's going on, also facilitated through the Switch Asia SCP facility between Asian countries and the EU. And this is really about mutual inspiration and the creation of shared expertise. And by also, tackling specific sectors with national governments, where we provide technical experts to support them, bring about policy measures, policy frameworks that kind of set the course for a more circular economy.
But when those experts come, they don't just say, this is how you got to do it.
Absolutely not.
It's a listening mission too. No. It's listening and then, right?
Exactly. And these are not, it's not like there are international experts flying into the country and, like showing the European way. It's not the case at all. And we are always also working with local experts, trying to, really profit from and engage with the expertise that is there in the countries and trying to kind of platform the ideas of circularity in a new way that also makes the business case to the national governments that we are partnering with. And for example, when we were working on housing and buildings, it's really about how the transition to climate neutrality can also bring so many added benefits, co-benefits, multi-solving problems that are already there in Pakistan with regards to housing affordability, housing access, also indoor health. Pakistan is an extremely geographically varied country. And so, you have to consider, other than in European countries, both extreme heat and extreme cold just for one country within 1 year. And so clearly, like these types of challenges can only be solved in partnership. But what I also wanted to mention with regards to entrepreneurship, because this was a point that Jana and Catherine were making, what we really need for entrepreneurs and for their financing to happen is clear policy signals that there is commitment to climate neutrality and to circularity, because this is really the starting point for many business cases. And this kind of allows entrepreneurs to get into these new spaces, to innovate and to implement. And once their commercial viability is demonstrated, then financing is usually not a problem at all. So it's about making the business case at the national policy level, but also creating one for these entrepreneurs that we're working with.
That's what Switch to Green is all about, isn't it? Among others. And Catherine, can you add to this thing about the two-way street? Because there you are in Glasgow, and a lot of the developing countries are saying, "Hey, we need more help from the developed world to make this transition." How much two-way street are you seeing there, or can there be more?
So there's definitely also been commitments on just transition here in Glasgow. So it's definitely a key topic of conversation. I think it's the difference between the macro level and then when you're actually getting down into the projects themselves. And I think there is a risk that I think one of the challenges that I see with the circular economy is that there's better understanding in some sectors than there are in others. So I think there's quite good understanding in the energy sector, for example. But I think we're just moving a little bit more into understanding the construction and particularly the infrastructure.
There's Jana,
a section, and then I think I think there does need to be more learning about, especially when you're looking at reskilling, and also I think sometimes depending on the power of the workers, but you've got potentially quite strong entrenched vested interests in a particular way of doing something, and so that can also be a barrier to looking to make the transition.
Sure, and there's a governance issue too. Let me switch over. There's a question from for Raymond, and this is a little bit about how the Ghanaian government might say, so what's in it for me? What you're doing? How does your project in Ghana help the government to manage waste? How can you demonstrate to them that you're making their job easier? It's worth their trouble to support you, right?
Fantastic. Yeah, sure. The Ghanaian government actually appreciates the work we do, because by the holistic approach we adopt, we are able to offer the government and utilities and food processing industries especially a financially affordable solution to make their waste problems and at the same time create highly sustainable multiple social, economic, and environmental impacts. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And
it's a mouthful. But how are they responding to that?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, with this kind of thing, it's not just the government that appreciates it. Even let's say the industry appreciates the circular model that we offer them to treat their wastewater and organic waste. I can mention some of the industries as the food processing industries. We have Nestle, Unilever, some of the big industries,
Big ones,
all
big.
are very happy to have their waste treated in an environmentally friendly manner, and the government appreciates this a lot.
Okay, so you're getting responsiveness.
Yes, and the appreciation is actually expressed in the government signing the first power purchase agreement with us. So when Ghana government passed the Renewable Energy Act in 2011, Safisana was the first to sign a power purchase agreement with a biogas technology. Until today, I think we are still the only ones benefiting from the very reasonable tariff the government gave us. It's an expression of the appreciation of the work we do.
All of which hopefully puts you on the road to breaking even in the next few short years, right?
Sure.
Yeah, Jana, what I see you nodding too, and what kind of cooperation support are you getting from the Mongolian government?
We have a great collaboration with the Ministry of Construction and Urban Development that has been also that has really appreciated our work. And basically the new policies and regulations that we have developed, we did them together. They were part of the working group. They approved the policies. So it actually shown their appreciation and the point that they are really interested, and they are really willing and want to implement sustainable practices now, but also develop them more in the future. So I think that they were really supportive in the process.
Okay, to everyone listening, please send in your questions. We're getting quite a few coming in. This is great. We have less than 15 minutes, but let's make this count. And let me go now quickly to Catherine. This question says, have you seen any initiatives that aim to support innovative startup businesses in green or sustainability linked bond financing? Are these SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, do they need finance, as these SMEs need finance to scale up? That's true. But how do they scale up and the financing?
I think that's a really big challenge. I think we've identified, SMEs, particularly in Southeast Asia, provide the bulk of the economy. We have sustainability-backed loans, which currently are more at the larger scale businesses, and so this is where there will be a reduction in the interest paid in terms for key performance indicators, and then there'll be a penalty if you don't make the impact. Sure. So that's something which I hope we can begin to move towards, bringing for smaller SMEs. So another area we're developing is an accelerator that would be particularly focused on SMEs in the blue economy, and that's actually building on the experience of something called the EU model, Blue Invest, which supports SMEs. So I think there has been quite a big gap in that space, looking at the innovation at one level and then the quite established businesses at the other. And so I think a lot more does need to be done in terms of that middle piece, and particularly matching investors with those projects, because there's a lot of interest out there, but that matching also needs to be.
Is that a trend, maybe moving more in the direction of scaling up and supporting SMEs as opposed to mega projects like, I've seen International Finance Corporation and others that support massive mega projects. Maybe maybe small is more beautiful now, or what?
I think maybe it's also, we've been discussing here this focus on jobs. And so I think there's also a realization, where are the jobs?
It's in the SMEs. That's usually the backbone, right?
Yeah.
The job in terms of job creation.
Yeah. So I think that's a key driver.
Yeah. Okay. Question to Cosima. To what extent does the EU approach to circular economy address the first and most important factor of reduction of carbon output, aiming at less is more, longevity of product? What is the switch to Asia approach on this?
So Switch Asia, of course, as an EU program, always worked in the larger context of the EU policies. And with the Circular Economy Action Plan, I think, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, there are quite revolutionary steps laid out already for, at least for the European Union member countries, for example, with the right to repair and other kind of keystone thinking around circularity, which definitely also includes the need to overthink and rethink our consumption patterns. At the same time, I would say that this sector, so the industrial sector producing goods for everyday life, I mean, this is really one of the most difficult ones to tackle. As Catherine has mentioned, I think with regards to energy circularity, the next steps are quite clear. Also in the building sector, for example, there are ideas laid out already. How in terms of quality of building stock and longevity of buildings, etc., this can really be improved. But with regards to lifestyle decisions, basically, I think that's also a task that society in the end has to take up, and where a large government organization like the European Union in the end can only pick up what is already there, provided by society, discussed by society, and take the right steps further.
That's where governments, education, communication, that's all very important on a local level for people for it to resonate among populations, I guess.
Absolutely.
We have less than 10 minutes now, and I want to go quickly to Jana and Raymond about how you would like to, how you can and want to scale up what you're doing, whether it be in Mongolia or beyond. Give me a bit of your dreamo vision of what's up ahead for you. How do you scale up, Jana?
My vision. Of course, my vision would be that 100% of all the construction and demolition materials can be recycled or reused or reduced. That would be the best example of circular economy. But it's not only about construction and demolition materials, but it's also about all different kinds of materials that simply we can put them back to economy. And for that, what we really need is more involvement from the industries, especially from big producers of waste. And currently we work predominantly on the household level, and we see a tremendous change, especially among young people. Young people, we see also in Glasgow, they really care about the environment. They are really worried about how our world will look like honestly in a few years or
Sure.
in a couple of decades. We see this is the target group, and those are the people that we really need to work with, and they are here to change the world.
Very good. Raymond, you as well. Today Ghana, tomorrow the world.
Sure. Great. So we have started already working on scaling up our operations here in Ghana. We are looking at other cities like Kumasi, Tamale, Takoradi. These are the big cities. And the way our thing is modeled, we want to tackle this issue from the most deprived areas. So our model is suited for slum communities, unsewered areas, and areas that are not well planned. So these are the areas that are heavily populated where we are focusing. We have also started some feasibility studies in other African countries. There's Mali, Uganda, Cote d'Ivoire. All on our radar. However, what we like to do things a little bit differently this time. Want to get government to understand the kind of model we present to them. Of course, with this type of things, the CAPEX has to always be financed by government, because I mean the problem is government. So the CAPEX is always difficult to raise by a private individual. So government has to look at this thing in a more holistic manner, because we tackle many things. Like I mentioned in the beginning, agriculture, energy, sanitation, which is the biggest problem for most countries.
Yeah.
And so definitely we are making a lot of strides. Everybody is interested in having this thing in their districts or in their locality, and we're getting more interest. People are calling us from different parts of the world to assist them. So for us, the future looks bright, but then we have to get governments and development partners really interested, especially in how to fund it. So
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Raymond. Let's go finally to Chantal. How do we accelerate all this? How does the European Union intend to accelerate these projects?
Well, yeah, that's the real question, isn't it? I mean, and we're seeing that we're trying to transition. We're doing some great work transitioning, but we're not really keeping the pace with the climate or the biodiversity crisis. So I mentioned earlier on the dialogue and the learning from each other, and also the legislation and the support that we can give as the European Union to governments to reform the environment and make sure that it's appropriate for the businesses that we want to see grow to really make this transition concrete. I think that what we also need to do is work with the private sector. I think you've seen a few examples here. This is something that's really essential. I mean, it's providing them with the right environment, but it's also working with the private sector. And here we're working with EIB and UNIDO to launch a new interesting model to support SMEs that have come up throughout this discussion today, because they are seen as the ones that can really promote this transformation, this transition, and in a way that's equitable, because that's where the jobs are. So that's what we want to also obviously make sure, is that we're providing jobs to the maximum amount of people, and these jobs are decent. I think these have to really be kept in mind. The other thing that we're pushing and we're discussing internally is the new European Fund for Sustainable Development, this big system of guarantees that we give to international financial institutions or European financial institutions, and they have to come up with pipelines of projects that we sort of set out, if you want, the terms of reference. And there again, we're preparing a window for SMEs. There'll be a section for young people, young entrepreneurs, because they're seen also as the ones that need the support. And for what we want to do on circular economy, on green economy, they're probably the ones that are going to be coming up with the ideas as well. And we're putting in, we're pushing our colleagues to put in objectives like 30% has to be circular, for instance. And then there are other windows on agriculture, biodiversity, forests that are now coming up that we're trying to develop. And we should also be looking at these sectors too. I mean, I love Raymond's sludge and smelly business that he's got, and I can think of other countries that I'd like to see him in, because we certainly need support, because we've tried and failed. So something that's much more ground up, I think, would be great. So I can also think of maybe putting our projects together. I mean, we've got initiatives like Nature Africa, where we want circular economies to be sprouting up around high biodiversity areas. So I sort of think that maybe there's another little job that we could do internally, and this is for Alex, who's also listening in, is maybe we should try doing some matchmaking between just the different projects that we manage within our department. Would already be a start. So that there are sort of the different areas. Obviously, we need to support appropriate capacity. I think education's come up. We have big education programs like Erasmus. We need to make sure that that goes green, that it provides the right skill set, that we're not just educating for the purpose of educating, but we have an objective as well. I think that's so important as well. Something that our commissioner is very, very keen on. So we've got an ear who listens to this. And then there's the power of trade. And doing trade deals and including a much more circular environmental approach, getting different actors together around the table
to make sure that value chain, the chain of production and trade is green. And I know we're out of time. Very quickly, I just came off moderating 2 days of a trade show that is supported by the EU on green energy, on the green energy transition in Berlin. And very interesting to see how there is support from the EU through Horizon and other programs for technology. And there's a technology transfer is a big issue right now toward the developing world. And if there can be more innovations, and they don't need to be massive or nano or whatever, but they can be very practical changes and developments in technology that can support projects out there around the world. That's also one of the links in what we need to give us hope there in Glasgow, Catherine. I hope this adds a little bit of hope to what goes on in Glasgow. Thank you so much to all the speakers and to all of you watching and your questions. And this does give me hope as well, that perhaps we can achieve some of these targets that we've set for us in these next very crucial years ahead. Thanks very much to all of you.
Thank you.